Welcome in, everyone. It's really great to have you here with us today for another deep dive. Today we have a mission that feels a bit like uncovering a hidden treasure.
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel that way.
Right. We are looking at a transcript from a YouTube video by the channel Speak English with Class,
Specifically, the video features an episode of a show called the English Leap podcast.
hosted by two individuals named Anna and Jake. And if you just glance at the title, or the description of the source material, you would see that it is ostensibly designed as a B1 level English language lesson.
Which means it's built to help non-native speakers learn some new vocabulary.
Exactly. But as we started reading through this transcript, we realized it is essentially a Trojan horse.
It really is.
Hidden right there inside what appears to be a very straightforward vocabulary lesson is a surprisingly profound, deeply relatable masterclass on emotional intelligence.
And self-control. And resilience.
Yes. Our goal today is to extract these life-changing psychological insights that are just sitting there waiting to be uncovered and apply them to our own daily routines.
It is a remarkable piece of source material because of that exact dynamic.
How so?
The creators are purposely using highly accessible, simple language because their primary target audience consists of language learners.
Right.
But they use that simplicity to explain incredibly complex human behaviors. Often when we try to tackle topics like emotional regulation or psychological resilience,
Yeah.
the conversation just gets completely bogged down in academic terminology.
Oh, absolutely. We end up tangled in abstract theories.
Exactly. But this source cuts right through all of that noise. It relies on vivid, everyday metaphors to map out exactly how our minds work when we are under stress.
It gives us a framework that doesn't require a psychology degree to understand.
But it still captures the deep friction of just trying to get through a difficult day without falling apart.
Okay, let's unpack this because the very first metaphor they use sets up the entire core theme of this deep dive. They introduce this concept of what actually happens when our emotions drive the car.
I love this imagery.
It's so good. The source paints this picture of when your emotions are behind the wheel. They do not follow the rules.
They speed.
They speed. They take wrong turns down the wrong streets, and eventually your whole day crashes. It is such a brilliant way to visualize that feeling of totally losing control over your own actions.
What's fascinating here is the sheer irony of the situation.
Yeah.
This is a lesson meant to teach English words, yet it provides a completely universal framework for managing the human mind, regardless of what your native language happens to be.
That is so true.
The concept of emotions driving the car perfectly illustrates the crucial difference between merely experiencing an emotion and being entirely controlled by it.
Because the source is very careful not to tell you to stop having feelings.
Right. That is a trap a lot of productivity advice falls into. This idea that you should be a machine.
Just a robot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this text explicitly says that feelings are fine. The danger only arises when the emotion moves from the passenger seat, where it is simply experiencing the ride and taking in the scenery, to the driver's seat.
Where it has its hands on the wheel.
Yes, and where it is dictating your actions and your reactions.
And we see this play out in the absolute most mundane, everyday ways. The deep dive kicks off by exploring these tiny, almost laughable morning triggers.
The ones that possess the terrifying power to ruin an entire day.
Yes. They talk about the alarm ringing and how your first thought usually isn't some grand vision of, I am going to grow and conquer the world today.
No, it's usually just, where's the snooze button?
Exactly. Where is the snooze button? And then a small problem hits. Jake shares the story about his coffee machine breaking in the morning.
A classic morning disaster.
He says he actually shouted at the machine because, in his words, it betrayed me.
Betrayed him.
Betrayed him. No coffee came out, and suddenly he treats it like an emergency. We can all relate to that, right? That ridiculous, entirely irrational feeling that an inanimate object is purposefully out to get you.
We absolutely can. And it highlights a very specific mental trap that the text captures brilliantly, which is catastrophizing.
Let's talk about that.
The source gives a few specific rapid-fire examples of this downward spiral. It shows how quickly the brain can take a minor event and turn it into an absolute disaster.
Like a text from a boss.
Right. A boss sends a short text message, and instantly the brain translates that brevity to, oh no, they hate me.
Or a friend doesn't reply to a message right away.
And the mind immediately jumps to the conclusion, they forgot me, I am alone now.
It escalates so fast.
Or, highly relevant to their specific audience, a language learner makes a small mistake in English, and the internal voice shouts, I am terrible. I should stop speaking entirely.
Wow.
This is the mind taking a minor neutral data point, a short text, a delayed reply, a broken machine, and projecting an absolute worst-case scenario onto it.
It is so easy to laugh at Jake yelling at his coffee maker, but when you look at the underlying mechanism, it is exactly the same as the person assuming their boss hates them over a two-word text message.
The exact same mechanism.
In both cases, the emotion has grabbed the steering wheel. And when that happens, the source says your motivation runs away like a cat.
Which is such an incredibly accurate image.
Have you ever tried to catch a cat that doesn't want to be caught?
It's impossible.
It just darts under the sofa and absolutely refuses to come out.
But this is where the source introduces the antidote to this morning crash. And it revolves around a contrast between what Jake calls old Jake and new Jake.
Yes, old Jake is the guy who looks at a bad morning, feels deeply tired, and decides to leave all the hard work to tomorrow Jake.
Tomorrow Jake is a phenomenal conceptualization of how we use procrastination to avoid emotional discomfort.
It really is.
The source makes a joke that tomorrow Jake is always very strong and has to do everything. It captures the delusional optimism we all have about our future selves.
We really do. We think tomorrow we'll wake up as superheroes.
Exactly. When the present moment feels overwhelming or negative or just plain exhausting, we offload the responsibility to this idealized future version of ourselves.
We convince ourselves that tomorrow you will magically have boundless energy
Perfect emotional control.
and a deep desire to tackle difficult tasks. But of course, tomorrow Jake is a complete fiction.
Completely.
Uh-huh.
When tomorrow arrives, you are still just you.
Uh-huh.
And you are probably even more stressed because now you have yesterday's work pile on top of today's work.
Right. Tomorrow you is just today you with less time and more guilt.
Beautifully said.
So if tomorrow Jake is a myth, how does new Jake handle a morning where the coffee machine commits treason and the motivation is hiding under the couch?
The source says new Jake isn't suddenly perfect. He still has bad days.
But when he is having a lazy or annoyed day, he just says, I will do 10 minutes.
He powers through for just 10 minutes.
And this brings us to the first cluster of key vocabulary the source focuses on: self-control, relentless, and power through.
Important words.
When I first read the word relentless here, I actually cringed a bit. It sounds a lot like toxic hustle culture. You know, just grind until you ignore your body, never stop working.
But they redefine it here, don't they?
They do, and it is a vital redefinition. Let's look closely at how the source frames being relentless in this specific context.
Because, as you said, we usually associate the word relentless with a sort of aggressive, hyper-competitive, never-sleep mentality.
Right.
But the source frames it entirely differently. Being relentless here doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean forcing yourself into a great mood or pretending you aren't tired.
It simply means acknowledging the negative feeling.
And acting anyway in a very small, contained capacity. The quote from the text that really stands out is Jake saying, I feel bad, but my goal did nothing wrong.
I feel bad, but my goal did nothing wrong. That is a profound separation of your internal emotional state from your external commitment.
It completely separates the ego from the task.
It says, hey, you are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be angry about the coffee. Your emotions are valid. But your goal didn't break the coffee machine, so why punish the goal?
That is such a practical reframing.
Think about your own mornings. How often do you let tomorrow you handled the heavy lifting just because your alarm went off early and you felt a bit grumpy?
How often do we punish our long-term goals because of a short-term annoyance?
It requires a lot of honesty to answer that.
It does. And the beauty of the New Jake method is the scale of it. He doesn't say, I feel bad, but I am going to work for 12 hours anyway. He says, I will do 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes.
When you power through for just 10 minutes on a bad day, you aren't just getting 10 minutes of work done. You're actually building a new internal identity.
Explain that a bit more.
The source points out that by doing a small task when you feel lazy or weak, you're sending a new message to yourself. You're proving to your own brain that you can show up even when you feel low.
That is the true definition of self-control as presented here.
Yes, you are proving that your actions are not entirely dependent on your mood. You are building trust with yourself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source doesn't just stop at the morning routine.
No, it expands outward.
That 10-minute rule is a great triage for a bad start, but the source forces us to look at how that morning mood can bleed into the rest of the day if we aren't careful.
It takes this idea of protecting your actions from a bad mood and expands it into a brilliant metaphor for the architecture of our entire lives.
They introduce the concept of rooms.
The compartmentalization metaphor.
The source suggests that a day is like a house with many rooms. You have a work room, a family room, a health or gym room, a hobbies room, an English learning room.
And the central danger they highlight is our tendency to lock all the doors to the house simply because the light is broken in one single room.
It makes perfect sense when you visualize it like that. If you burn your toast in the kitchen, you don't declare the living room and the bedroom completely ruined.
You don't burn the whole house down.
But emotionally, that is exactly what we do all the time. We let a bad commute ruin the first 3 hours of the workday.
The text pairs this house analogy with a secondary metaphor that is just so incredibly visceral.
The wet jacket.
Yes, it says that carrying a bad mood from one part of your day to another is like wearing a dirty wet jacket from place to place.
You keep it on at work, you keep it on at home, you wear it when you see your friends.
We all know what it's like to physically wear a wet coat. It is heavy, it is restrictive, it makes you physically cold, and it smells.
But the psychological equivalent is what the source is really digging into here.
Think about the contagion factor of a wet jacket. If you sit on the sofa in a wet jacket, you ruin the sofa.
Right, you leave a puddle.
If you hug a friend, you transfer that cold dampness to them. If you bring the bad energy from a frustrating meeting in the workroom into the family room, you are actively dampening the experience for everyone else.
You are walking into a completely neutral environment like your living room and actively choosing to ruin the vibe because it's something that happened hours ago.
Taking that jacket off requires a massive amount of self-awareness in the moment.
And Anna shares a deeply personal anecdote to illustrate exactly how hard it is to take that jacket off.
She talks about having a terrible morning teaching a lesson.
The technology completely failed. Her students were confused, and she admits she felt like a total beginner. It bruised her ego.
By lunch, her instinct, her emotion, fighting to drive the car, was to just go home and cry, to declare the whole day a disaster.
But instead, she treated that bad lesson as just one room. She took a walk, she took a slow breath, and she actively decided to leave that dirty wet jacket behind before walking into her next class.
And this introduces the next major vocabulary focus: resilient and shake it off.
How does the source define resilience?
The source defines a resilient person not as someone who never falls down or someone who never has technology fail on them. It defines resilience as someone who doesn't stay down.
The critical insight here is the contrast they draw between a dead day and a resilient day.
Yes. When Anna had that terrible morning, she easily could have declared the whole day dead. She could have locked the doors to the rest of the house.
But a resilient person lets the day stand up again for the afternoon.
They compartmentalize the failure. They acknowledge that the morning was awful. They don't pretend it wasn't. But they recognize that the afternoon is a brand new room with its own potential.
I really appreciate that phrasing, letting the day stand up again.
It highlights that this is an active choice, not a passive feeling.
Anna actively chose to leave the heavy energy behind so she wouldn't infect her new students in the afternoon session.
Which makes you think about your own transitions throughout the day.
Absolutely. When you cross the threshold from your workroom to your family room, are you dragging a wet jacket in with you?
If you get a frustrating email right before you leave the office, do you let that dictate your tone during dinner?
The source is asking us to notice this behavior without judging ourselves and just practice the friction of closing one door so we can fully open another.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this ability to compartmentalize and leave the wet jacket at the door is tested most severely when we step into crowded interpersonal environments.
The source transitions beautifully from our personal daily structure to the arenas where our emotional regulation is under the highest amount of pressure.
And where the stakes are the highest: the workplace and the school environment.
The source calls work and school big emotional gyms, and I think that imagery is spot on.
You can just picture it.
Your office or your classroom isn't just a place where tasks get done or information is exchanged. It is a place of heavy emotional lifting.
It is packed with many different people, countless differing opinions, clashing personalities, and constant small moments of stress.
You are constantly getting a workout whether you signed up for a gym membership or not.
And in these emotional gyms, the source identifies two very dangerous extremes of reacting to that constant stress.
Let's talk about the first extreme.
The first extreme is exploding in the heat of the moment. The text provides a story from Jake to illustrate this side of the spectrum.
He was in a team meeting and he was already tired and stressed from a long week.
Which, Tying back to the beginning means his emotional reserves were already low. His grip on the steering wheel was loose.
A colleague made a small, relatively harmless joke about his project, and Jake exploded.
The way the source describes that explosion is so physically grounded.
Jake says he started talking too fast. His voice went high-pitched, and he started using extreme language.
He accused his colleague with phrases like, "You never support me, you always do this."
He was completely hijacked by the emotion. The anger was driving the car.
But then the source pivots to the second extreme, which I think a lot of people might actually struggle with even more.
It is just as dangerous, but it is much quieter, bottling up your feelings.
Yes, the text uses Anna's experience at a different older job to showcase the danger of bottling up.
She had a boss who would regularly say small, hurtful things to her.
And instead of addressing it, instead of setting a boundary, Anna would smile, say thank you, and push the feelings down.
She hid the emotions inside.
The source maps out the inevitable conclusion to this strategy. The pressure builds until one day the container breaks.
All the old feelings from all the past weeks come out at the exact same time.
She found herself crying in the bathroom, completely overwhelmed, and suddenly wanting to quit her job entirely over an accumulation of small things.
It's a striking contrast. You have Jake exploding outward, actively damaging a relationship with a colleague and probably his professional reputation.
And you have Anna imploding inward, damaging her own mental health and almost destroying her career path because she couldn't take the internal pressure anymore.
Both sides are incredibly heavy. Both extremes are destructive to your success in that emotional gym.
So what is the alternative? If you can't explode and you can't bottle it up, what do you do?
The source calls the middle path being composed.
The definition of composed in this context is nuanced, and achieving it involves a lot of friction.
The text defines it as looking calm and steady on the outside while actively managing the chaotic feelings on the inside.
The source uses a very poetic physical description here. Your heart might be dancing, your hands might be shaking, but your face is smiling.
It is the conscious separation of internal physiological panic from external behavior.
You are not cold. You are not a robot who doesn't care. You are simply steady. You are holding the space.
Heart dancing hands, shaking face, smiling. I think anyone who has ever had to give a difficult presentation or confront a difficult coworker knows exactly what that feels like.
It is terrifying.
Being composed is not the absence of fear or anger. It is the mastery of your physical reaction to it.
But doing that is incredibly hard. When your heart is dancing, every instinct tells you to either run away or fight.
And the source gives a very simple, practical trick for achieving this state when you feel the urge to either explode or bottle it up.
It suggests taking one slow breath and waiting just 5 extra seconds before answering.
Or if that isn't enough, using a simple script like, "Can we talk about this after the break?"
The power of the 5-second pause is immense. Think about what those 5 seconds actually do on a practical experiential level.
They force a wedge between the physical sensation of anger, the dancing heart, and the external action.
You are reclaiming your veto power. When Jake's colleague made the joke, if Jake had taken just one slow breath and waited 5 seconds, the urge to use his high-pitched voice and say, "You never support me," might have passed.
He could have just said, "I'd prefer we focus on the data."
As the source wisely notes, those 5 extra seconds can literally save jobs, preserve friendships, and prevent what they humorously but very accurately call long WhatsApp fights.
We've all been dragged into one of those long WhatsApp fights, and they are never productive.
Never.
So as you are navigating your own emotional gyms this week, think about which extreme you default to. Are you an exploder who lets the high voice take over when you are tired?
Or are you a bottler smiling while pushing it all down until you end up crying in the bathroom?
Finding that composed middle ground, just taking that one slow breath and waiting 5 seconds, is the heavy lifting that actually builds emotional muscle over time. So what does this all mean for how we interact with the wider world? We've talked about our internal reactions, our morning routines, our day's structure, and our immediate coworkers.
But the source shifts gears here to tackle something even heavier and honestly a bit more insidious: how we handle external judgments and the broad expectations of society.
It dives deep into the mental prisons of stereotypes.
This is where the psychological depth of the source really shines, moving from interpersonal conflict to societal pressure.
It examines how other people's opinions, or even what we imagine they think about us, can entirely dictate our emotional state and limit our actions.
The text introduces the concept of a stereotype as a small room that we force ourselves to live inside.
They define a stereotype as a simple, often unfair idea about a person or a group, and they provide some highly relatable examples to ground the concept.
The examples they choose are very pointed. There is the stereotype that quiet people can't be strong leaders, that you have to be loud to be in charge.
There is the stereotype, which is obviously very relevant to their specific audience, that making a mistake in English means you aren't intelligent.
And then Anna shares a very personal, very real struggle from her own career, the stereotype that a real teacher must be incredibly serious, and that if you're playful or use humor, people won't respect your expertise.
She admits she almost stopped making her playful content entirely because of this imaginary picture in her mind of what a teacher is supposed to be.
The metaphor of a stereotype acting as a small room is profound. Think about the physical sensation of being in a small room.
You can't stretch out, you can't run, you are confined.
When you internalize a stereotype, you willingly restrict your own mobility, your own creativity, and your own potential.
You stay confined to the dimensions built by the expectations of others. It is a tragedy of self-limitation.
To combat this, the source presents two specific antidotes to help break out of these small rooms: growing a thick skin and rising above it.
Let's spend some time on growing a thick skin, because the source offers a crucial nuance here that I think a lot of standard self-help advice completely misses.
Often we are told that having a thick skin means you become totally numb.
You are supposed to be a Terminator. Nothing hurts you. Insults bounce right off you.
But the text argues that is not it at all. Growing a thick skin means you learn not to let every comment control your life.
It explicitly says you still feel the pain. You still feel what they call the small ouch when someone criticizes your accent or your work or your personality.
You just don't delete your dream over one stranger on the internet.
That distinction between being numb and feeling the small ouch is vital. It validates the emotional response.
Feeling a sting when someone mocks you is a normal human reaction. It means you care about your work and how you are perceived.
But the thick skin prevents that small ouch from becoming a fatal wound to your ambitions. It stops the emotion from grabbing the steering wheel and driving you to quit.
And this concept is naturally paired with the idea of rising above it.
Rising above it means operating at a higher frequency. It means you make a conscious choice not to descend into the same drama or negativity as your critics.
The source gives a great practical example of what rising above it looks like.
If someone laughs at your English or points out a flaw in your project rising above, it doesn't mean you yell at them.
It means thinking, well, at least I am brave enough to speak a second language, or at least I am putting a project out there and continuing to practice.
It means showing results and growing. The text specifically notes that rising above it is not fighting in every comment section or arguing with every critic.
It's elevating your actions, not matching their hostility.
Which again requires a massive amount of resilience and self-control.
It is incredibly tempting to fight back, to defend yourself, to get down in the mud.
And the text astutely points out a very painful reality. Sometimes the harshest judgments, the walls of those small rooms, don't come from anonymous strangers on the internet.
They come from family and friends who simply do not understand your dream or your methods or why you are working so hard.
This intimate proximity makes the judgment hurt even more.
A passing comment from a stranger might be a small ouch, but a passing comment from a parent or a close friend can feel devastating.
This makes the need to rise above it to maintain your composure and your thick skin even more necessary and significantly more difficult.
That is such a sharp observation. The people closest to us can accidentally build those small rooms for us better than anyone else, precisely because we value their opinion so much.
So think about your own life right now. Take a mental inventory. What are the small rooms you might have built for yourself?
What stereotypes about who you are or what you are capable of achieving are you living inside based on the passing opinions of your family, your friends, or even societal expectations?
Are you ready to feel that small ouch, except that it will sting and step out of that room anyway?
Because breaking out of those rooms requires making tough choices. You have to decide to leave the room.
And that leads us to the final major concept in the source material: how to systematize your success by separating decision time from feeling time.
This section is really the operational manual for everything we've discussed so far. It addresses the actual mechanics of forward momentum.
Making decisions is inherently difficult when your emotional landscape is noisy.
When fear, self-doubt, and the echoed opinions of others are loud in your head, clarity vanishes. You end up paralyzed.
The source introduces the concept of being decisive, which it defines as making a clear choice, and crucially, not changing your mind every 2 minutes.
And once again, Anna is wonderfully vulnerable here about her own past failures in this area.
She talks about how when she first started creating content and building her platform, her feelings were completely the boss.
They were driving the car full speed.
If she felt scared or intimidated one week, she made very long, serious episodes to try and prove she was smart.
If she felt doubt the next week because of a comment, she stopped entirely.
Then she'd feel guilty and switch to short episodes. She was bouncing all over the place because every new emotion triggered a new change in direction.
Her feelings were driving the car right into a ditch, and she wasn't making any real progress.
This raises an important question. How do we actually implement emotional control when the fear or the doubt is overwhelmingly loud?
It's easy to say just be decisive, but how do you do it when your heart is dancing?
The genius of Anna's eventual solution is that she doesn't try to suppress or ignore the fear.
She doesn't tell herself to just stop being scared.
Instead, she implements a rigid system of compartmentalization for her internal state. She literally separates her workflow into two distinct phases: feeling time and decision time.
It is such a mature, highly structured approach to dealing with yourself.
During feeling time, she takes a notebook and she just lets it all out.
She writes, I am scared of this new project because, and she puts all the fear, all the anxiety, all the doubts on paper.
She gives the emotion a dedicated space to be heard and validated. She isn't bottling it up, which we know is dangerous.
But then, and this is the hardest part, she physically closes that notebook. She shuts the cover and she opens a new phase. Decision time.
In decision time, the parameters change completely.
The feelings have had their say, they've been documented, but they do not get a vote in the final outcome.
Now she looks at facts, she looks at data.
She evaluates real tangible risks rather than imagined catastrophized scenarios.
Based on that objective reality, she makes a 3-month plan.
And here's where the friction of true self-control comes in. She sticks to that plan for 3 months, even on the days when her feelings return.
Because the feelings will return.
They will shout that she's bored or that she's scared or that it isn't working fast enough.
I just love the discipline of that. She is essentially telling her own emotions, no, we already had this meeting. We decided we will test this plan properly for 3 months. You can complain, but we aren't changing the plan.
It's like she's acting as a parent or a manager for her own brain.
It culminates in this ultimate defining metaphor of the entire piece, tying everything back to the beginning.
The source says that emotional control doesn't mean you become a cold robot with no feelings. It means you become a leader for your own life.
Your goals are the thing driving the car.
Your emotions are absolutely still there. They are sitting right in the front passenger seat with you, but they're wearing a seatbelt.
That image is spectacular. It perfectly resolves the tension of the whole lesson.
The emotions are safe. They are acknowledged. They are right there in the front seat, along for the ride, looking out the window and experiencing the journey.
But because they are securely strapped in with a seatbelt, their hands are not all over the steering wheel.
They cannot grab the wheel and yank the car into oncoming traffic just because they got startled by a broken coffee machine or a critical comment.
They have a place, but they do not have control.
This is the synthesis of everything the source has been trying to communicate about psychological resilience.
It's an approach that feels so incredibly applicable. The next time you face a big choice or a daunting new project, try actively separating your feeling time from your decision time.
Let your emotions vent in a notebook. Let them complain.
But then close the book and let your data-driven goals grab the steering wheel.
Let your relentless 10-minute actions support a firm decision, rather than letting your emotions force you into endless overthinking, pivoting, and starting over.
It's a powerful reminder that true emotional regulation is an act of internal leadership.
And what is so striking about this source material is that by naming these concepts, by teaching the words resilient, composed, relentless, compartmentalizing into rooms, the source is doing far more than having people pass a B1 English exam.
Naming an abstract emotional state gives you tangible power over it.
When you have the vocabulary to identify that you are bottling up, or that you need to shake off a wet jacket, or that you are living in a small room built by a stereotype, you are no longer a passive victim of that feeling.
You become an observer and then a manager of your own psychological state.
It has been quite a journey today, unpacking all of this.
We started by looking at the very real danger of letting a broken coffee machine or a vague morning text ruin our entire day.
And how new Jake uses the 10-minute rule to prove his goals are stronger than his moods.
We learned how to navigate the architecture of our days, moving through the many different rooms of our lives without dragging a dirty, contagious wet jacket between them.
We explored how to survive the high-pressure emotional gyms of work and school by taking a 5-second breath, keeping our face smiling while our heart is dancing and staying composed.
We figured out how to break out of the small rooms of stereotypes by feeling the small ouch, but growing a thick skin anyway.
And finally, we learned how to buckle our emotions into the passenger seat, separate feeling time from decision time, and let our goals drive the car.
It is amazing what you can learn when you look closely at a piece of source material that seems so simple on the surface. And I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder as you go about the rest of your day or your week.
This source material was specifically created from the ground up to help people learn a foreign language.
But perhaps mastering our own emotional reactions is exactly like learning a second language.
Think about the parallels. At first, when you try to change how you react, you feel entirely like a beginner.
You stumble, you use the wrong reactions, you get frustrated with yourself, and you want to quit and go back to your old habits.
You feel clumsy and awkward when you try to stay composed and take a 5-second breath instead of just exploding like you normally do.
It feels unnatural, but if you are relentless, if you don't demand perfection, but simply power through with daily 10-minute increments of practice, you start to learn the grammar of your own mind.
Eventually, fluency in your own emotions becomes second nature.
You stop frantically translating your feelings and start simply leading them. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We appreciate your time, your curiosity, and your willingness to unpack these complex ideas with us.
Until next time, take care.
And keep driving your own car